Hello and welcome back. In this episode, we're going to have a go at making a bunch of sci-fi consoles, or computer terminals, or whatever you want to call them. Basically, generic technical stuff like this. And as usual, you can find a link to the PDF file in the description. So let's make a start. Okay then, the first thing we'll need to do is take some thin cereal box type cardboard and onto that we'll glue the main console texture with a regular glue stick. Then, once that's dry, we'll score it along these two lines here before we start cutting anything out. And as you can see on the printout, I've also put some location marks along the top and bottom, and these are just there to indicate where it's best to cut the texture. For example, if you want to make one that's a 1/2 inch wide, you can use these areas here, and then it's the same thing for a 1 inch section, 1.5 inch section, 2 inch section, and so on. So for this example, I've cut out a 1.5 inch section from the middle of the strip. And then all we'll need to do is fold it along the scored lines, like so that we end up with something like this. Now, for the sides, we'll take a piece of thin single corrugated cardboard, and onto that we'll glue a couple of the side panels. Then, once that's dry, we'll cut those out with a sharp knife. And all we're going to do next is hot glue those in place. So the way I like to do this is to first run a line of hot glue along one edge of the middle section and glue the one side in place, and then do the same thing on the opposite side. There we go. Next, I'll apply some hot glue to both edges of the front panel and fix that into place, and then do a similar thing with the back panel as well. And when we're done, this is the kind of thing that we should be left with. But as I mentioned earlier, we can also make these in a wide variety of different lengths. So here's a couple of smaller ones that are made off camera, and we can also do things like gluing two back to back to make something that you might find in the middle of a large room or something like that. So yeah, that's the main assembly done. But we can also add a bit more detail to a few of these, so I'll go into that next. Right then, for this next part, we're going to make an upright piece to glue to the back of the console. So for this, we'll need a piece of thin foam core, and onto that we'll glue the bottom left texture. Then, because in this example I've made a console that's 1.5 inches wide, I'll cut out a piece of this upright texture that's also 1.5 inches wide. But obviously, we don't want to leave the back unfinished, so we can use the texture on the bottom right to remedy that. And once again, I've just cut out a 1.5 inch piece to match. Then we can apply some glue to the back and stick that to the reverse side. And there we go. Something like that. Now, we're also going to need to cover the edges, so we'll take the plain texture that you can see here and cut a strip of that that's the same thickness as our upright piece. Oh, and we'll also need to cut it long enough to wrap around the 3 visible edges. Okay, then we can apply some glue with the trusty glue stick and start wrapping that around the foam core, so that the top and both sides are covered. So I'll just finish this last bit off, and there you go. That's the back covered, the front covered, and now the edges are covered as well. Okay, so here's the 2 pieces that we've made so far, and all we'll need to do now is add some glue to the back of the console and stick that to the upright panel, like you can see here. So I'll just make sure that it sits nice and flat and that it's stuck together properly, and that's all there is to it. So that's how we can add a bit of variety to a couple of the consoles. Right then, we're also going to need to make a couple of corner pieces, and these are made in a similar way to the consoles. So we'll first take some thin cardboard and we'll glue the main corner texture onto that. Then we'll score it along these lines here, trim it to size with a sharp knife, and bend it into a cube-like shape. Next, we'll take some thin corrugated cardboard again, glue on 2 of the side textures, and cut those to size. Then we'll glue those into place, just like we did with the consoles, so that we end up with something like this, As I say, it's just a basic little cube shape. Okay, next we'll take some thin cardboard and glue on one of the screen textures. These are scattered around the PDF, and then trim that to size. And we'll also need to cut out one of the textures for the reverse side as well, and glue that onto the back. So, something like that. Now, for this next part, we'll take one of those tiny drinking straws and cut out enough of the plain texture to wrap around that, which is exactly what I've done here. And from that, we'll cut out a length that's roughly a ½ inch long. Then we'll need to squash the straw flat and cut off one end at a pretty sharp angle, so this kind of thing. So I'll just unsquash the straw again, and now we can add a spot of hot glue to the inside of the angled end, and then glue that onto the back of the little screen that we just made. So this is the kind of thing that we're aiming for. Then all we'll need to do is add another spot of glue to the other end of the straw, and glue that to the centre of the cube, like so. And there you go, there's the finished corner piece. And as you can see, it works best if you have the screen facing one of the corners, as we can then add a couple of consoles to either side to make an external corner, like so, or swap them around to make an internal corner, like you can see here. So yeah, that's the corner piece done. But we're not quite finished yet, as there's still one more piece to make. Okay then, for this last piece, we're going to take some thick cardboard, and onto that we'll glue one of the floor tiles. Then, as you've probably already guessed, we'll cut that out with a sharp knife. And while we're at it, we'll also need to make another of the screens, just like we did in the last part. Then we'll take a regular sized drinking straw, and enough of the plain texture to wrap around it, and glue that into place. And from that, we'll cut out a piece that's around 7/8 of an inch in length. Next, we'll squash the straw flat and cut off one end at a roughly 45-degree angle. Then, just like before, we'll add some hot glue to the inside and glue the straw to the back of the screen, just like you can see here. So, there you go. And to finish it off, all we'll need to do is apply some more glue to the bottom of the straw and stick it to the centre of the floor tile. And there you have it. It's just a simple little piece, this one, but it's something that might look good next to a doorway or something like that. Anyway, that's pretty much everything covered, so here's a quick look at some of the pieces that I've put together using these textures, and no doubt you guys will come up with some other variations of your own, and here's those same pieces in action. So yeah, that's it for another episode. I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you are running a sci-fi game at the moment, I'd be interested to know what system you're using. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.